That's what helps you solve those problems. So for our best practice, the first thing we want to do is we want to check both the live and the remote playback. So I've seen this more times than I would like to count. You have a camera system that's a few years old. The client goes and checks their live view every so often. And they're like, yep, my cameras are working. And then they come back and something happened a week and a half ago, a month ago, something like that. They go through the playback and all of a sudden they're realizing, oh, it's not recording 24/7 and it's not actually recorded the event that I wanted to have. I'm Jeremy Vance and this is the FAQing Security Podcast. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. It's just a solo episode today. Well, kind of. Lula has stuff on her face. Lula's here with me today. What we're going to do is we want to actually spend some time talking about our best practices for electronic security and site security specifically. What we'll do is we're going to do this episode with the first two best practices from our document, which you can grab at ztiadvanced.com.au. Then we'll do another podcast in the near future for number 3 and 4, and another one in the future for 5 and 6. I have 6 on there in total. The idea is to give you kind of a real world takeaway of what each best practice is for and how it helps you keep your site safe. So if you're somebody that runs a business or has a property that you need to keep safe, this is specifically items that you should be doing on a regular basis to make sure your system's working. Because what's going to happen is at some point in time, something bad will happen. It's just the nature of life. And we want to make sure that that system's doing the best it can for you. So we'll go from there. Let's jump right in. So we want to look at updating users for the control room for your alarm system. So what commonly happens is that when the alarm system is put together, so somebody comes to me and they're like, I need an alarm system for my business. We go out there, we install the alarm system, we sit down with them, we run through a bunch of things regarding the best way to handle after-hours calls and who's the emergency contact, who's responsible for authorizing service tickets, things along those lines. Everything works great. Now, what happens a year later is the control room gets an alarm from the site. They bring up the event. This is abnormal for the site. They need to actually reach out to somebody to let you know that there's something interesting happening on your site. It could be vandalism, could be burglary. It could be literally a bunch of different things. However, there's a cat hitting the tripod right now. However, happens is we call the after hours and the first after hours picks up and we go, hey, so-and-so, this is Jeremy from security. We have some alarms that are going through. We need to send somebody down there. Did you want to check it out? That kind of thing. That person then tells us, oh, I haven't worked there in 6 months. I can't help you. Just please stop calling me. So then we go to the next contact. And let's say that person doesn't pick up because it's 11 o'clock at night, right? Then we go to the third contact and we call that person and they're like, oh, no, I actually moved on just recently, but they should have updated you with the phone number. The amount of time that we have spent calling people who either don't pick up the phone or are not working for that company now is ranging into the 3 to 5 minutes from when the first event happened. Now, after that point, if none of them pick up, we're sending a patrol. And that patrol is going to take 45 minutes. It's going to cost you about $90. All right. So having those after hours contacts, along with some other things like video verification and other smart things we can do to kind of cut down all that time, to the point to even get rid of the manpower call outs so that you don't have that 45-minute wait time there. All of these things are important. They all build off of each other. So this is the base building block. Now, the best client I have, which I don't name my clients. So the best client I have, I don't name my clients, but is a company here in Queensland that actually has multiple sites. And what they do is once a month, they have a spreadsheet that they actually send to us, and we update that with the control room every single month. So it's a little bit of a retail store, so like a chain. So basically, they have people leaving and coming and going quite often. Maybe your site doesn't need the contacts to be updated every single month, but it's not bad practice. Really, what happens is every time your after hours change, you need to update it with your security company. Now, the easiest way to do this, because a lot of times this will be longer than a month for a bunch of you, is email your security provider. You go, hey, Jeremy, who are my current 3 after hours emergency contacts? Send them through to me and I'll update them. And then I'll send you the list and you go, okay, hey, John's not here anymore. Let's replace him with Tom. Here's Tom's phone number. Here's his voice code, that kind of stuff. It's also important if you are using voice codes or PIN numbers for authorization through to the control room, or if you're using mobile numbers, things like that, that you keep those up to date as well. Make sure your after hours know their voice code. If it's something they're going to forget, that's no good. The other thing is if you're really conscious about your security, you should actually update the voice codes every few months as well too. I know for most of you that's not going to be the case, but it is good practice. All right, so that covers updating your user contacts with the control room, which is the first of our best practices. It's one that often gets overlooked. It's one that can cause a lot of havoc in the back end when it is found, because it's found when the system's needing to perform instead of beforehand. Makes sense. All right. So next we're going to talk about checking your camera system and making sure that your camera system is working and up to date. And we'll look at that in just a moment. Okay, so I'd like to take a quick second to talk about our sponsor for this episode, which is my software company, which nobody really knows about, which is etiadvanced.com.au. We develop APIs, apps, and things like that. Now, what that means is that's just a fancy way of saying that we help you build apps. So if you ever had that idea where you're like, oh, there should be an app about this, or oh, it would be so good for my business if we had an app for my company that did this, we build that for you. So just reach out, have a conversation with me that costs nothing. I can give you the background on how it works and the workflow and how it goes from idea to actual product. Costs you nothing. So reach out, let's have a conversation with myself, and we'll go from there. Again, you can reach us at ztiadvanced.com.au. The last best practice that we'll talk about today is checking your camera system. Now, again, everybody kind of sits into that set and forget mindset with all of the things in life, not just your camera system. It could be your computer, it could be your software, it could be your printer, everything. How many times have you gone into your modem and actually updated the firmware on your internet modem? It just doesn't happen, right? It's working, we don't think about it. Now, from a security point of view, that can have a lot of ramifications, specifically when we're talking about how electronic security can blend into cybersecurity. So it's kind of a little known fact, but if you have your cameras on your network that your business LAN is on, and you let those cameras firmware go out of date, or you're using maybe like a cheaper brand that you bought from somewhere that is maybe not as reputable as like a professional brand, then you're leaving yourself open for hackers to get into your system through old vulnerabilities on IoT devices, which is what cameras are. So we need to make sure that your camera system is kept up to date. Now, there's a few different layers on this as well. So the first layer is we want to make sure that your cameras are actually working. If you are, your camera system is hacked, there's a few different things we'll see, but also we think about OH&S, health and safety, customers like losing things, falling down, like our own staff shrinkage, like people stealing things out of tills or like taking boxes when they shouldn't be. All of those things, the camera system is what helps you rely on for that, right? That's what helps you solve those problems. So for our best practice, the first thing we want to do is we want to check both the live and the remote playback. So it's often, I've seen this more times than I would like to count. You have a camera system that's a few years old. The client goes and checks their live view every so often. They're like, yep, my cameras are working. And then they come back and something happened a week and a half ago, a month ago, something like that. They go through the playback and all of a sudden they're realizing, oh, it's not recording 24/7. and it's not actually recorded the event that I want it to have. So it's important that we actually make sure that both the live view and the recorded playback are there. You should have at least 30 days of recorded playback if it's a building site. If it's like a solar pole or something like that, you'll have less. But for an actual physical property, you want at least a month of recorded footage. The other thing to check in there is the night vision. So as cameras get older, the lens, if it's not maintained properly over time, will degrade, will have issues, spiderweb scratches on the lenses, moisture, a bunch of things. When you look at it at nighttime, if all you can see is scratches, as a cat, if all you can see is scratches, then all of a sudden that's no use to you, right? So real story. We have a farm that's out in the middle of Queensland. They had somebody come onto the property, start stealing diesel from one of their tanks. They were unable to see anything on the cameras. So when the control room brings up the cameras or the client brings up the cameras, all they see is white like lines from the scratches and the IR bouncing out scratches. As far as they can tell, it's just a false alarm. So it's important that we go through, check the recorder footage, check what it looks like at nighttime, make sure those cameras are performing the way they should. If your camera system's getting old, it's much like a phone. It's time to replace them. They're only a few $100s each, and it actually, the amount of money that you spend on that compared to the amount of money you lost from all the diesel being stolen from your tanks, it's actually a bad ROI to not change them, right? So check the performance. Now, when you're in there, the other thing we want to check is we want to check the accounts and we want to check the firmware. Now, for the firmware, my suggestion is leave that to your security provider because that can get a little bit different with different brands. And we normally say we check to do that every year, at least once a year. Have them come in, do a maintenance, check your cameras, your firmware. On your side, you can 100% go in and check your accounts. Now, if your camera system has been compromised, you will see things because computer hackers are maybe not the most subtle. I have seen where there's been accounts created called "You have been hacked" or "Camera hacker" or "I found you on the internet," right? Things that are obviously out of place. My system should have Jeremy, Tyler, Shan. That's it, right? And then if I see you have been hacked as an account, that is a pretty clear sign that something has gone wrong there on our firewall or our firmware side and that we need to get it checked out. It's also important at that point that you notify your security provider ASAP and whoever does your security from your IT side, whether it's like ZTI, my company, or if it's like a different security provider or IT provider. You just need to make sure that they know because they need to start investigating that and locking things down. Basically, we go to a zero permission situation on that and then just full lockdown, isolate everything that we can find that's bad, start peeling it back, and then rebuild the firewall and then start adding permissions back in again. So there is a process to that, but sometimes, specifically with older camera systems, people can hide in there. So if you think of it like a real world building, the people can use these old hubs of technology to hide and then reach out to the rest of the network. From a design point of view for security professionals out there, my suggestion is to actually completely isolate the camera network from the business LAN. So the camera network is completely separate. For my larger clients, we're actually putting in an entirely different NBN connection because it's actually cheap. Costs like $1,000 for the setup, and I think it's like $100 a month for an NBN line. And that keeps that completely separate from the client's business network, which means there is no cross-pollination. There is no way that anything that can happen on the security networks affects the data that the client holds for their specific clients. You still have to worry about firmware and things like that for vision, but it's not going to be somewhere where somebody can jump in and then pivot to the rest of the network. So, important, once a month, you go through and you check your camera system at the very least. If you have the manpower that can do it once a week, awesome. If you have somebody do it every day, cool. But at least once a month, check the live footage, check the remote playback, make sure your accounts are clean. And that's all that's to it. If you do have any questions on how to do that stuff, make sure that you let me know. And in closing, those are the first 2 best practices we have on our 6 best practice sheet that I can send out to everybody. So reach out to me if you want it. You can also find it on my website, which is ztiadvanced.com.au. And you can download the PDF there and use it to your heart's content. So again, that was updating your contact information with the control room for your emergency after hours. That's 1. And then checking your camera system on a monthly basis. That's number 2. We'll do 3, 4, 5, and 6 over the next few episodes, along with some other things that we're throwing in as well too. Like we have an episode coming up where we're talking to some kids about cybersecurity. And then we have one where we're talking about ransomware and how it affects companies and the victims in particular. And then we also have an episode coming up where we're going to be talking to an accountant that is specifically talking about starting small businesses, specifically security and man of the van businesses, which we've done a similar episode about business planning. This is more on the account side. So that should help anybody in those fronts. Now, before I say goodbye, just make sure to like, subscribe, follow, share. I think right now, sharing is probably the best thing you can do for the growth of the podcast. I'm not going to lie. There's this whole science behind social media networking and podcasting, and I don't understand half of it. I'm really just here to try to make things to help people, and that part I'm trying to learn along the way. But I think right now, sharing probably helps the most. However, I will say that for my personal ego, follow and subscribe, because that actually makes me feel good about myself. So, I'm a simple man, really. So that's it. Please help me out on that front. I hope these 2 things have been helpful. If you want the full document, you can download it from my website. And until next time, you guys stay safe. We'll talk soon.